Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for the Jewish National Fund for the College Cooking Class, A Taste of Israel, where we're going to learn how to make shakshuka and more with the one and only Debbie Kornberg. This class is going to be the first in a series of fun, educational, Positively Israel online programming opportunities for college students and more. My name is Noah Pitkowski. I'm proud to serve as the Jewish National Fund Campus Fellow at Binghamton University. I'm currently the director of the Binghamton Hillel's major events, and I'm also an alumna of the Jewish National Fund Alternative Winter Break and the Chavruta Gap Year program. Before we begin the cooking class, I also just want to invite all of you to join me on JNF's Alternative Break to Israel. If you love Israel and you can't wait to get back, you want to do something amazing on your next winter break or any break, if you're looking to volunteer in Israel, JNF's Alternative Winter Break, it's really the trip for you. You are going to get your hands dirty in meaningful community projects, experience Shabbat in Jerusalem. It's really a trip of a lifetime. This trip is open to adults from ages 18 to 24. The round trip airfare from New York City to Israel, meals and accommodations, all of it's included. The participants are responsible for raising a minimum of $1,150 from at least 5 different donors. The trip is scheduled to currently take place between December 26th to January 3rd, and the deadline to register is November 12th. So it's coming up, and in the event that we are unable to operate the trip in December of 2020, we're going to be transferring all the registration and the donations to the summer of 2021. So you can register today at jnf.org/break. That is jnf.org/break. And I am very proud to present this evening Debbie Kornberg. She's the president of JNF San Diego. Debbie Kornberg's enthusiasm for spices began at an early age in her great-grandmother's kitchen. She owns and operates her own spice company, Spice and Leaf, and previously owned the Spice Way San Diego. As a master teacher with more than 25 years of experience, Kornberg teaches Spice It Up with Deb, a live cooking experience, workshops, and is a regular contributor of Fox 5 San Diego Morning News. She currently serves on the Go Northeast Task Force for the Galilee Culinary Institute by JNF and the Beit Asher Food Initiative and Technology Center. I'm now proud to turn it over to Debbie.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Noah, for that lovely introduction. It's so heartwarming to see your involvement with student life on campus and JNF and bringing those experiences and wanting to share that. So thank you. We are going to be making shakshuka today, and because this is primarily a college group, I went under the assumption that nothing is cut, nothing is prepped. Normally when I do these classes, I'm like, let's take a few minutes and do that, but we're gonna go from start to finish, and I'm gonna carry you through that. So we're gonna make our shakshuka, we're gonna do an Israeli salad with some feta cheese, and then I'm gonna just show you how to like take hummus that's bought from the store and just spoosh it up a little bit and zhuzh it and make it a little fancier if you want to. So with that, we're gonna get started. So the first thing I'm gonna invite you to do is take a pan that is a pretty good size, that you wanna have a deepness to it because we're gonna be building our shakshuka in here. And you're gonna turn on your stove. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that and just heat up my pan. So if you are in your kitchen, get the pan out, turn on the stove, heat it up a little bit. In a few moments, we're gonna add about 3 tablespoons of olive oil to this. And in the meantime, we're gonna cut up 3 garlic cloves. So let's go ahead and do that. Hopefully you have your cutting board out and you have a little knife and your garlic cloves, or maybe you bought it already minced and went that shortcut, you know, so you've got your jar of minced garlic that you keep in the fridge, and that's great too. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut these up real quick. So that way they're nice and small. We are gonna be building our flavors with shakshuka. with our garlic and our onions. I can feel my pan is hot, so I'm gonna add 3 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm using Israeli olive oil. It's called Galili, and we will talk more about this in a few minutes. But for right now, I just want to get that olive oil right in the pan. You're going to spread it around. Okay, so if you're just logging on and you're like, wait, she already started. I have a pan. I've turned on my stove. I've added 3 tablespoons of olive oil, and I'm now going to add 3 garlic cloves to the pan, and I'm going to turn down my stove. So that way, I'm just going to put it on a really low temperature. Okay, because next we are going to add 1 onion cut up. So if you did not cut your onion like I did, I'm so glad I cut my onion beforehand because I was bawling my eyes out. So I didn't want to do that on camera. I can see everybody there has their camera off. So you can go ahead and cry your eyes out. If you haven't cut your onion, I want to show you how. Leave the base and cut off the stem. And then you can just gently cut it through so that way you can peel off the skin. Okay, and bring it all around. And this is a nice way to keep it because what's going to happen is you're going to keep all that skin on the base so that way you have something to hold on to as you're cutting. Okay, so you can see I've got all of this right here and you can keep it there. And I'm going to go ahead and cut it in half. Okay, and then you can just go ahead and cut it just like this. And you see I'm making these slices. So, and I'm going to tuck in my knuckles so I don't lose any fingers. And once you do that, you can go ahead and just cut it. And you've got your pieces already minced up, just like that, okay? So you want to take a whole white onion and cut it up. You're going to dice it. This is called a dice because you can see my pieces are small versus a chop would be a bigger piece. And minced is what we did to the garlic. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add that in. And because the camera is on me, I'm not going to cry in front of you today. Maybe next time. And I'm going to add the rest of my onions. And I also called for a half of a red onion. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in there too. Okay, and I'm going to now turn up my heat to a medium heat. So that way it's going to start to cook down. We're going to get those onions translucent. I'm going to repeat everything I've just done. So that way if you're just tuning in and we're making our shakshuka and you're wondering what have I already done, I have my pan on. I added 3 tablespoons of olive oil, 3 garlic cloves minced up, cut up really small, or if you have that jar in the fridge, you can scoop out a good tablespoon. And I've added 1 whole white onion and I diced that small and half of a red onion or a purple onion, depending on what you want to call it. And you can hear my stove. I'll bring the microphone over. And it's starting to sizzle and that's the sound we want. This is going to be the base of our shakshuka. So we're going to just let that cook down a little bit. And by the way, as I'm cooking, if you have questions, you can go ahead and chat them in the chat box and I will repeat them to everybody so that everybody can get the benefit of your question and I can answer it. Or if you want to show me something or you want to be able to personally ask a question, just virtually raise your hand. You're all college students. I know you know how to do that. So just virtually raise your hand and we will call on you and unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question. When I'm like this, I'm actually looking into a camera, but I do have a monitor. So if there's something you want to show me, I can do that and I can be able to see, okay? So I've got my onions cooking down and it sounds good. I hear that sizzle. You don't want it too high of a temperature because otherwise they're going to turn brown or black before they've started to cook down. When you're cooking with onions, you can get them caramelized. They get a nice, beautiful golden brown on them, but you cook them slow. We're not going to actually even caramelize today. We're going to get them translucent, which means they start to look kind of clear. You can almost see through it, a glassy look for our shakshuka. So while this is cooking, let's take a moment and talk about what is shakshuka, which is, it's an egg dish with what I call a tomato sauce. If you want to go fancy, you could say a tomato ragu, that's French. And shakshuka, which is a very common Israeli dish. You go to, any restaurant, you can usually find shakshuka on the menu if it's a breakfast place. There's even a place in I think it's Jaffa, not Tel Aviv, but in Jaffa, called Dr. Shakshuka, and it is amazing. They have every kind of shakshuka possible, and Mr. Dr. Shakshuka is pretty much always there. Anytime I've been, he's always there hanging out. He loves hanging out with the customers. He has an interesting story behind him. But shakshuka actually originated from the country of Tunisia. And so it's a North African dish, and you'll find in Morocco, Ethiopia, Tunisia, Yemen, they have these stews because it's something you can make for a lot of people. It is very simple ingredients, and it can last. So shakshuka is basically a tomato sauce base with poached eggs on top. And the way it ended up in Israel is in the 1950s. There was mass migration from the Arab countries of Jews that came to Israel to be able to make aliyah. And of course, what we know is that they brought their food with them. So shakshuka was one of those dishes that immigrated with the Tunisian culture. They came to Israel and they started making the food, and it caught on to just be a general dish. There are lots of dishes like that have caught on and are just part of the Israeli culture that maybe wasn't based there, say falafel or shawarma or hummus, or things that are always a part of the region. But shakshuka was something that was brought to Israel in the 1950s, and now it's just part of the narrative when you talk food in Israel. Hopefully your onions are cooking down. I'm going to show you mine so you can see what they look like, because they're starting to get that glassy look, and I want you to be able to see what I mean. If you have questions, please don't hesitate. This is a class for you guys, so I want you to be able to end up with a delicious meal by the end of this, because this is your dinner, I'm guessing, if you're cooking with me, and I want you to be able to enjoy it. So feel free to ask questions. While this is going, we're going to go ahead and get our peppers set up. So I'm going to continue to cook this down a little bit, and we are going to add a half of a green pepper and a whole red pepper. I cook a lot, so I do kind of fancy things. Sometimes I'll put a paper towel down to absorb moisture, but I just share that with you, my little cooking tips for along the way. So you're going to cut up your whole red pepper. And I saved part of my green pepper to be able to show you some of the things that you might want to be able to do with your green pepper. I'm only going to use half, but you see this membrane here. It's not something we want to use. We do try not to get seeds, but you do want to try and get as much of the top of it as possible and be able to use all aspects of the plant. You can see there's still some membrane here, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the membrane, and then I can slice it up. So here we go. I'm just going to remove that membrane part. It doesn't taste as good. And I'm going to go ahead and dice this actually into small pieces. So there we go. And just like that, again, only half of a green pepper, and we're going to do a whole red pepper. If you're in a kitchen with some friends, everybody can get in on the action and start dicing and cutting, so everybody feels like they were part of making their meal together. There we go, and I've got one more piece here, and then we're going to go ahead and add this to our pan with our onions and garlic that are looking absolutely fantastic. And I realize I might be cutting a little faster than you, but don't worry, I'm not going to go on to any steps for a few minutes. We're going to give a few minutes for this to cook. So I've added my whole red pepper and half of my green. Make sure my pieces are broken up in there. Okay. And next on deck after this is cooked for a few minutes, we are going to start to add our spices and our parsley and our tomatoes. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to have ready while you're doing that, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, so we'll mix this in. And what's going to happen with the peppers is it's going to have a similar cooking process. It's going to get a little glassy. It's going to start to cook down. And once it has, then I know I'm ready to add my spices, my tomato sauce, my diced tomatoes. So we'll bring those on deck so you can see what I've got, and you can make sure you have what you need in the kitchen. And I'm going to say this a bunch of times, but college kids who are cooking with me, you better take a picture of what you're doing and text mom, because I know I would be ecstatic to see my kid cooking. And my son, actually, I did teach him how to make shakshuka, and he loves it, and he makes it all the time. It's a really good, hearty dish that you can have for breakfast or dinner. Okay, I'm using organic. I always encourage using organic. Can of diced tomatoes, which means they're already chopped. They're in some of the tomato juice. If you bought fresh tomatoes, I'm going to just have you go ahead and cut those up into pieces, into chunks, and I will just show you the size of it so you can see. Nothing fancy, just go ahead and cut them up. Make sure you keep all the juice and add it to the sauce when we get to that. So these were fire roasted. It's a little extra flavor. It's what they had that was organic, so I bought it. And then I have a can of tomato sauce. If you have tomato paste that's what you bought, totally fine. We're just gonna make sure you add some water to that. So if anybody has tomato paste instead of tomato sauce, you can chat us or let me know, and I would just direct you to add some water to that to thin it out a little bit. The next thing we're also gonna be adding is parsley. So I have two kinds of parsley, depending on what you bought. There is the traditional curly parsley that everybody uses as garnish. You go to a delicatessen, there's always a sprig of parsley and a little slice of orange. I don't know why, but that's what people do. Back in the day, it was always in Jell-O molds when I was growing up, but you probably don't even know what that is. So you can either use the curly parsley or flat. This is called an Italian parsley, so you can see the leaves are flat. Both are fine, either one, whatever you have. We're gonna go ahead and cut up enough for like 1/8 of a cup. So from a measuring cup standpoint, you can just fill it in your 1/4 cup to half of that. Okay, so just going ahead and chopping this up. I probably don't even need to use all of this. This is a lot. If you like it super parsley, you can go ahead and add more. And then it's like more of a green shakshuka, totally fine. And there's a question, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna listen to the question and I'm gonna repeat it back.
Is there a replacement for parsley if we do not like it?
Is there a replacement for parsley if we don't like it? Some people, if you like cilantro, you could use that. If you don't like parsley, I'm guessing you don't like cilantro either, and I would just skip it. Just don't add anything, and it's fine. If you have a little bit of oregano, you could throw that in, but you really don't need to. It's not gonna make it or break it. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and add 1/8 of a cup to my mix here, and you can see my peppers are cooked down really nicely. There we go. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead. The one thing I'll say, if you're learning how to cook, there are 2 things I can teach you that are great best practices. One is to always be organized and have everything in place so that by the time you're done, it doesn't seem like a bomb went off in your kitchen. And the way to do that also is to clean up after each step. So rather than just leaving this and moving on to the next, I'm gonna go ahead and clean this up so I have a clean workspace for whatever it is that I have coming on deck next. Okay? So we've got our parsley, our garlic, our onions. It's all cooking down really nicely in here. And now I am ready to add my spices. I have so much I want to tell you about spices. So we'll come back to that. But first off, I want to make sure we add everything we need to. And while things start to cook, I will dive a little deeper into the spices. So you are going to want to have coriander ground up, which is this one right here. And it looks a lot like cumin, which is this one right here. Cumin has that really pungent smell, and sometimes it's too strong for people, but when you cook with it, it really adds a nice balance to flavor, right? It has that bitterness. So when we're cooking, we want sweet, we want sour, we want the fat, we want the acid. And so all of this is creating a really well-balanced dish. So and then we're gonna add paprika. So we're gonna go ahead and add 3 teaspoons of paprika. So you can go ahead and measure that if you want to, and just sprinkle it in over everything. I usually just cook with my eyes and I'll eyeball it, but I want to make sure I'm showing you everything that I'm doing step by step. I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of cumin and mix that in there. Sprinkle that right on top. And 2 teaspoons of coriander. Coriander are the seeds that come from a cilantro plant, if you did not know that, and it has a really different flavor. So if you smell this and you don't like cilantro for whatever reason, it's totally different. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and mix all those spices right in, and then we're gonna add some salt and pepper if you would like. I do recommend salt. Pepper, you can decide. If you love spicy, you could add some cayenne to it. I have something called Aleppo pepper. You could go heavy on the actual pepper, or you could add a jalapeno or something like that to it if you wanted to give it a kick. And I'm gonna add some salt also. It helps bring out the flavor of things. So I'm gonna go ahead and make sure I season that pretty well. I just took a pinch of it. You could do a ½ teaspoon if you wanted to measure that. Okay, so this is all really well mixed in. You can see I've got my base here, and now I'm gonna add my tomatoes and tomato sauce to this, and then the flavors are gonna start to meld together. So I'm gonna take this whole can and pour it in, and I'm going to add my tomato sauce and pour that in. And I don't wanna miss anything, so I'm scraping it out. And now what we're gonna do is just mix everything in together so that everything is well incorporated into one another. And so this is the foundation of our sauce. So this is everything that we need until we get to the eggs. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna turn up the heat just a little bit. I'm gonna put it onto a medium instead of a medium-low. And I'm gonna grab a lid, which I did not take out beforehand, but you can see all my beautiful JNF behind me. I have my tree certificate. I have my JNF Tzedakah boxes and a vintage poster dating back to the 1920s, kind of cool. So I've covered this. I have this on a medium heat, and we're just gonna let that simmer for a little bit. While that is going, I'm gonna take a moment and just recycle my cans, clean up my workspace. Okay, and I can hear my temperature's hot, so now I'm gonna start to bring it down because it's already starting to bubble. So I'm gonna bring that down and put it on a medium-low because now it's covered. Okay, and we're just gonna let that sit and cook for a few minutes. And we are going to talk spices. All right, so one of the things I wanted to kind of have you think about is, where do spices come from? And that might seem like a silly question, but it makes a lot of sense once you'll see where I'm going with it, which is it's all aspects of the plant. And spices were discovered hundreds of years ago, and actually thousands of years ago, because we all know the spice trade. But if you go to the Bible, it's mentioned throughout all different kinds of herbs and spices that are used throughout the 5 books. And it talks about different ways it was used to sanctify things and to give thanks. So we know it was incorporated into our tradition early on, and it was a way to add flavor and actually preserve our food. So what I have here is I just wanted to be able to share with you how we really, in our culture and in society, can take notice of how we use all aspects of the plant to be able to add flavor to our food. And I love starting with the cinnamon stick, because cinnamon stick is actually the bark of a cinnamon tree. And so you can grade this, and that's how you get your ground cinnamon, but this is how it starts. And there's all different kinds of varieties. This is acacia cinnamon stick, and they have different flavors. So the same is true for something of any kind of spice or herb, depending on where it is in the world. There are different varieties. And the easiest way to explain that is something similar to an apple, right? There's Honeycrisp, there's Gala, there's Delicious. There's all different varieties, but at the end of the day, there's still an apple, but there's a little bit of a variation in the flavor. And the same is true for spices, whether it's a cinnamon stick, a ground cinnamon, cassia versus Ceylon. We also use berries. So this is something called allspice, and they're tiny little berries that get crushed up. Often you find it in something like a pumpkin spice blend or some of those warm flavors. Here is our fennel seeds. So we're utilizing seeds. Cumin comes from seeds also. Here are my sesame seeds, which is something really common, whether it's on a bagel, the everything blend, or if you grind it up and make it into a paste, that's how you get tahini. Okay, so that is something that dates back to ancient times. We know there are ancient sesame presses that would make it into a tahini paste. Here are some pink peppers, same thing with black peppers. These are the berries that go from the tree. We have our bay leaves, rosemary, all these things get dried, lemon rind. And I would be remiss if I didn't show you the most expensive spice in the world, which is saffron. And it's such a shame you cannot smell this because it smells so beautiful. And you might be wondering why it's the most expensive spice in the world. It's like $1,000 kilogram, something. I don't speak kilograms. But the reason why it's the most expensive is it's the stamens of a flower. So you can see these little strings are the stamens of the saffron flower. And it is hand-picked. That's not something that you can just scoop up. Somebody has to be going in there manually to get them. And it has a beautiful fragrance. It's really common in Moroccan cooking and North African cooking, Persian cooking, absolutely delicious. And the last thing I'll show you is the rind of a lemon. So we can dry those. You use dried fruit also and incorporate that into things. So that's just a little spice one-on-one to share with you. So we've got all these delicious spices going on here. And then you can take spices and make blends with it. And this is za'atar. So anybody who's been to Israel or had Israeli food knows za'atar. And za'atar is basically made up of a plant called sumac. It has some sesame seeds and an herb called hyssop. Sometimes oregano or thyme is used, and that is how you get the za'atar. All right, enough Spice 101. Let's get back to our cooking. Take a look at your sauce. See how it's doing. It's looking good. So, do I need to hold that up or can people see that? Okay. So I'm just giving it a mix. It's smelling delicious. We're gonna let that go couple more minutes, and what we are going to do now is get our eggs prepped and ready. So you want to make sure you have eggs ready to crack, and I like to use a glass to be able to crack it into, and then I'll pour it in. It's sometimes a good idea to check your eggs, make sure there are no blood spots in them or anything weird about it. So if you want best safe practices, that is one way to do that. So you're going to want to make sure you have this ready to go. And with that, I am going to show you how we're going to start to create our shakshuka. So what I have here is my sauce, and it's all evenly based. But what I'm actually going to do is take a spoon and build little wells. Are there any questions? Does anybody have any questions? Is everybody able to follow along? Just throw that out there. I'm going to make 5 wells around the circle, and then I'm going to put 1 in the middle. And the reason for building these little wells is so that I can drop the eggs into them. I'm going to turn down my stove to a medium low so that these can, when they get dropped in and they start to cook slowly. You can think of it like a poached egg, right? So we're basically going to poach the eggs in a tomato sauce instead of poaching it in water. All right, so got my egg, and I'm going to go ahead and drop, whoops, not the shell, just the egg. And I'm going to go ahead and pour that in. Okay, so I'm going to do this 6 times because that's the size of my pan. You might be doing a smaller batch of it, which is totally fine. So as I do this, I mentioned shakshuka is a Tunisian recipe. I'm just grabbing a towel from my drawer to kind of get from my hands. A Tunisian recipe, and it's a go-to dish with these very common spices. There we go. Is that better? Yeah. Okay. So, but if you look at Israel as a melting pot of food culture, there are so many dishes that are like that. So we have Ethiopian food, and there's something called berbere that's a part of the Ethiopian culture. Yemen food have their go-to foods. First of all, their go-to spices are something called hawaiiage, and they use that for a lot of their cooking and their stews. And for Moroccan cooking, there's something called ras al hanout, which is known as like the head of the store. So it's a delicious spice blend with a lot of cinnamon notes to it. And often in the North African culture, they use those spices in their cooking, and it creates a really warm, robust flavor. I'm curious from you guys, maybe you want to chat some of your favorite foods that maybe you've had in Israel, or Israeli food that you've been exposed to that you really love. I'm sure many of you have had borekas, are one of my favorites. I love cooking those. If there's anything you're interested in learning about that you want to make, please chat with us. We really want to know what it is that you want to learn how to make, just like shakshuka, and maybe you'll see that in the future. Who knows? All right, so I've got my eggs cooking here, and I'm going to go ahead and close this once again, and I'm just going to let these cook. And so right now you can see the yolks, but slowly the whites will start to cook, and I will show you through that process. So that way you'll know when they're done, and the goal is to cook them, but not overcook them. Sometimes, well, everybody has a different preference, whether or not you like that yolk solid firm, a little bit runny and soft. I tend to like it a little bit on the softer side. So we're gonna go through that process together. Hopefully all of you, I'm gonna try and see if I can see what people are doing here, if they're cooking and getting a sense of things. People are not sharing their screens. People, I can't see what you're doing. If anybody wants to, at the end, share, I'd love to see what you come up with, but I can't see. So in the meantime, hopefully you're with me in this process and you've got your eggs in and they're cooking really well. We are going to now start our salad. So we are going to want to get our cucumbers, our tomatoes, our feta. We're going to use some lemons and olive oil. And if I'm not going to use salt because I'm using the feta, so we'll talk about that. So the first conversation we need to have is, what is the right cucumber to use? And you could use something like an English cucumber, which I have right here. English cucumber are the super long ones. They do have a lot of seeds in them, but not as many. Or you could go for what I like to call an Israeli cucumber or a Persian cucumber. They're much more accessible now. You can even find them at Trader Joe's and Costco. And for both of these, I wash them and then I just keep the skin on. And we're gonna cut it up really small like this, and I will cut with you. To me, that is the secret success of making a good Israeli salad, is everything's cut up small and fine. So I've got a lot of things going on here and I want to make sure you can see everything. So I'm just going to move this out of the way so that way I can push a few things out. We've talked about our spices. I can move this out of the way. There we go. Okay. Like I said, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask. There's no wrong question. So I'm just going to cut off the little stems of my Israeli cucumber, and I'm going to go ahead and slice it in half. And then I am going to, I made 4 slices with that, just so you can see. And now I'm going to cut that up really small. Okay. Sometimes when you go to the Israeli like falafel stand, they have it teeny, teeny, tiny. I don't know that you want to get it. You can, if you have the patience for it, you can go ahead and do that, but these are pretty small. And I'll show you, if you happen to have an English cucumber, or maybe you just have a regular cucumber. If you have a regular cucumber, I would peel the skin, and I'm going to show you how to de-seed it. I don't recommend keeping the seeds. You can if you want to, because it is your salad and you're going to be the one eating it. But I will show you the difference. Okay. I did cheat. I did cut up my tomatoes already. So I do have these done. These were cherry tomatoes, and I did cut these up. They're small little pieces there. Okay. So if you're going to do an English cucumber, which are the ones that are long and they usually come already wrapped up. So I'll cut it and then I will slice it down the middle, and then I'm actually going to quarter it, and I like to take out the seeds. So for an Israeli salad, you don't always have to, but it's less moisture, and I find that it tastes better, but it's totally subjective. You can keep them if you want to. No judgment. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and slice these up. We're going to have a really nice Israeli salad. And I'm making a lot because I'm actually bringing some to a friend's house after this. My friend is she had surgery. And so she's like, no, I don't need anything. And then I told her I was making shakshuka with you guys. And she's like, okay, I'll take it. So this is for my friend Britt. She had knee surgery last week. All right, so there we go. One of my favorite Israeli dishes, aside from shakshuka and barekas, is actually something called sabich. How many of you have heard of sabich? If you're jumping up and down like me, then all right. And if you're not jumping up and down and you have no idea what I just said, let me tell you what it is. Sabich is a sandwich. It's in a pita bread. It's very similar to falafel, except it doesn't have falafel in it. So for all you people that aren't falafel or shawarma people, this is a great alternative. It's vegan. It has a fried eggplant. It has hard-boiled egg. It has, what?
That's not vegan.
Oh, sorry, it's not vegan, it's vegetarian. My husband's correcting me. Thank you, honey. Okay. Hard-boiled egg, potato, and it has tahina, cucumber, tomato, Israeli salad in it. And it has something called amba. Amba is what brings the sandwich together magically. Amba is like a mango chutney. So it's got this sourness to it, and there's just something magical when you eat it in the sandwich and you get all of those layers of bites, the eggplant, the egg, the potato, the Israeli salad, the hummus, and the tahini, and the amba. Is there a question?
The question is, will you share your sabich recipe?
I would love to share you my sabich recipe. And actually, I follow the recipe from Michael Solomonoff. So that is my recipe. I'm not trying to like recreate the wheel when he already does it magically. And we'll pull out the book so you can see it. I think it's the Israel one, not Zahav. And I'll tell you what I love about his sabich is the way he treats the eggplant and how it's fried. Yeah, Israeli soul. So people, if you do not know this cookbook, you should. I'm giving a shout out to Michael Solomonoff. The way he treats the eggplant in here is, first of all, he does add salt to it to let it soak. And then he adds cornstarch on the outside of the eggplant before you fry it. And that makes all the difference. To get that crispy outside. So that's my secret, Michael Solomonoff, okay? There you go. I got my recipes too, but you know, I don't feel the need to go and redo things when he's got it knocked down. Take a peek at your eggs, see how they're doing. Mine were cooking kind of slow, so I'm cranking up the temperature a little bit to get them cooking a little bit faster. I'm still gonna keep my lid on, so that way the heat all stays inside. Hopefully by now you've had a chance to cut some cucumbers and tomatoes. My other favorite recipe I will share with you. Okay, wait, I have to finish about sabich. I am a little obsessed about it. If you go to Israel, the next time we're all able to go, whether it's our next JNF conference in October 2022, I'm already planning to buy my ticket. I'll tell you why in a second. But if you are planning on going and you get to Tel Aviv, there is this little hole in the wall kind of place. And actually Michael mentions it in his book. I had been there before I had read that. And it's right across from Shuk Carmel and the Tel Aviv Shuk. And it is so good. There's a line out the door and there's literally a sign in Hebrew that says you cannot order this without eggplant. Like there's no special orders. This is what it is. You get what you get and you're gonna love it. Okay, that's my soapbox on sabich. I will tell you my other favorite recipe is something called Bastia, and Bastia is a Moroccan dish, and I do have a recipe for that, and I'll be happy to share it. It is labor intensive. It is something you make for special occasions. It is basically a shredded chicken with turmeric, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cooked down onions. And then you layer it in phyllo dough, and it's just mwah. You sprinkle a little powdered sugar and cinnamon on top, and it's the best. So good. All right, I'm going to show you my eggs. Here they are cooking, much more strong. And what I want to do now is show you my eggs are still loose. When I put my spoon on top, they're loose. If you push your spoon on it and it has a firm touch, that means that they're starting to cook and get ready. Okay, so gonna go ahead. If you feel this is too watery, I'm gonna now just leave it open and let it cook down this way. So I can just put my lid over here. I'm gonna now make my Israeli salad. I prepped my tomatoes in advance, and one of the reasons why I like to do that is I have this paper towel that catches all the moisture. I told you I'm a big fan of using it, so that way I don't get all that tomato juice in there, and it's more of a dry salad, not so mushy. I'm gonna go ahead and add my cucumbers. Grab a spoon. And I am not going to add my feta yet. I'm gonna add the feta at the end. The reason for that is when I'm mixing all the flavors together, I don't want to get all mushy. I like to keep my crumbled feta crumbled and not spreadable. Next on deck is I'm going to add a whole squeezed lemon to this, give it some nice acidity. There we go. And now I'm going to add some olive oil, and I am not going to add salt. You can add some pepper if you would like. I'm so like in tune to say and salt, but I'm using the feta, so I'm not going to. I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil to this. There we go. I'll just put that there. Can we talk about olive oil for a moment? Finding a really good olive oil does make a difference in your cooking. I know you're all students on a budget, but if you do ever come across one, taste it just so you know the difference, okay? Everyday olive oil is absolutely fine, but a high quality one is really good. If my friend Sydney Shank is out there, she knows. Hello, Sydney Shank. I can't see if you're there, but maybe you are. Now I'm gonna go ahead and add some feta cheese, a couple ounces, and I'm just gonna gently fold that in. And I have a delicious salad ready to go. So we've already got our salad done. My eggs are cooking. And these are good. This is done. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off. And I'm just gonna let that sit for a few minutes. We have one more item to prepare together, and that is our fancy hummus, okay? Super fancy. I'm gonna show you what to do if you wanna like really impress your guests. Here it is, store-bought. I'm gonna go ahead and grab a dish. Whoops, really quickly there, okay? I have a dish. And you can make hummus from scratch also. I do have a great recipe for that I like to use. But if, you know, there's nothing wrong with store-bought. And you can go ahead and just put this on a plate. Let me move this out of the way so you can see. And I just spread it around. This is just like what you would see in the restaurants, right? In Israel, right? They build a nice little well. They add some olive oil. And they pour it around just like that. So, by the way, I would be remiss if I didn't mention something about JNF's Culinary Institute. So I've got my olive oil here, and I'm just going to sprinkle on some paprika. So for all of you foodies out there, and you don't know this, JNF is building a culinary institute in the Galilee, all the way up north in an area called Kiryat Shmona. I actually have a map that we can pull up so you can see exactly where I'm talking. And I'm just gonna, oh, there we go. You're gonna pin that, thank you. So there's the map of Israel, and it's all the way up there. You can see Kiryat Shmona. So the reason why JNF has taken this on is multiple. I mentioned earlier how Israel is truly a melting pot of food culture, and from all these amazing countries of people that have emigrated to Israel. And so we've really gone on the map with food, and by building the Culinary Institute, we're actually taking a stake in it and telling, honestly, the world, we have a lot to share about food and we know a lot about food. That's the message that we're telling the world. But JNF really looks beyond that, and they can see an opportunity to build out the Galilee as a region and the North as an ecosystem for people to have jobs, housing, medical, a whole infrastructure. And so the Culinary Institute really serves twofold. One, it's a place where people can come to learn how to cook. So after you finish college and maybe you want to go to culinary school, that's an option. Or if you just want to go visit and go for classes for a week or two, or just check out the restaurant, those are all things you can do through JNF and the Culinary Institute. Not until after 2022, but you know, it'll be there. But JNF has such tremendous vision in being able to understand the impact of building something like that and the whole infrastructure of jobs and housing that it's going to create for the region. Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and the center of Israel is so heavily populated, we have to really be mindful of how we can build out, whether it's Beersheba and the south or in the north. And so JNF is amazing at doing that. And to just tag on to what Noah said earlier about alternative spring breaks, hopefully there'll be an opportunity to go to Israel, and maybe you'll go up north and you'll be able to see the start of it in Kiryat Shmona, who knows. Okay, so I've got my shakshuka here, delicious and ready. I have my really fancy hummus that I literally took out of my Trader Joe's, but you would never know looking at it because I put in my olive oil and some paprika, and it looks just like what you would see in the restaurants of Israel. I have my pita bread that I'm ready to scoop with, and my shakshuka. And hopefully some of you out there did some cooking with me and have something to enjoy for dinner tonight. And maybe the people that are in the apartment with you were wondering what you were doing, and you've got this delicious meal ready to serve. I hope you share. And I'm just gonna go ahead and pull this over so that way I have everything together. So that way everybody can see. I've got my complete meal. I talked a lot. You can certainly do this in less time. It's not even been an hour. It's been about 50 minutes. So this is a 30-minute meal that you can make whenever you want to get a taste of Israel. Is there a question?
Yes, first, they said that was great, thank you. When would we use the optional sumac?
Ah, sumac, thank you. So the sumac you can sprinkle first of all on top into the hummus, and you can also add it to your shakshuka on top also. It's a lemon acidic flavor. I didn't talk that much about it, but it's actually a really magical spice. It is a great salt alternative. So it has that lemon acidic flavor. They're just crushed up berries, and it's a very common spice used in cooking. So you could add it to the shakshuka while you're cooking, or you can just sprinkle it on top like I did. And, you know, it's always fun to be really chefy. And you could put a couple sprigs of parsley if you like it. For the person who doesn't like the parsley, don't do that. Okay, you can skip that part. You have permission. With that, are there any other questions that people may have? And then I'll share a couple thoughts before Noah jumps in. So the last thing I just want to mention about opportunities to go to Israel, obviously we're in COVID now, but as Noah said, alternative winter break or spring break is such a great opportunity to go to Israel. And Birthright, I will mention Birthright. My son has done Birthright, my daughter not yet. Hopefully in the coming years, she'll have an opportunity to be able to go. And of course, JNF has that option of being able to do shorashim routes, JNF track. And the last thing I'll mention is Caravan for Democracy, which is a great way to go to Israel if you're not Jewish and you want to get experience in student leadership. Maybe you have friends that aren't Jewish that are jealous that you get to go on Birthright, or you yourself would like to go for Caravan for Democracy. It is an opportunity to be able to experience that. Is there a question?
There is. What is the best way to serve the shakshuka without making a mess?
Okay. I will grab another plate. People want to know how to serve your shakshuka without making a mess. So let me grab a spatula, and I'm going to show you how I would serve it on a plate, which is I would just go ahead. Can you see that? Hopefully you can. I just scooped it right up, and I lay it down as such. And then I put my pita, my Israeli salad, and my hummus, and you've got a meal ready to go. Yum, yum. So I'm going to go ahead and crack this open so you can see what it looks like, because it's nice and soft. It's ooey gooey. That's the way I like it. So that is how I cooked it. So you can see the yolk is coming out. I think Noah would like that too. My husband is trying to get to it. He's like, let me add it. Noah, this is right your speed, right? You said your favorite dish before we started was a soft-boiled egg. So I want to virtually hand this to you so that you can enjoy it. I'm sorry you're so far away, but wait, I handed it to my husband. He took it. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for having me. I want to pass it back to Noah unless there are any other questions. Is there one more question?
Yes. Barb says some places put cheese into shakshuka. Would you recommend?
Some people, Barb asked, should I put cheese in shakshuka? Some people do that. You could do a goat cheese or a feta if you want to. That is common. You could sprinkle it on top. You have feta here, so try it on the side, see what you think. But it's something that I would just sprinkle on top. It's not something I would cook in it. So yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Debbie, for leading this amazing cooking class. I don't know about all of you. I feel so much more confident in my shakshuka skills and my spice knowledge, definitely ready to get back to the kitchen. And our next Positively Israel program, it's going to be October 15th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The program is titled Ethan Zahn, Surviving and Thriving During Difficult Times. The Jewish National Fund, the Jewish National Fund program will provide college students with an isolation survival guide and highlight the importance of Tikkun Olam. The October 15th program will be part of Israel on Campus Coalition's Fall Israel Festival. You can register for Ethan Zahn program at jnf.org/surviving and thriving. And you can register today for Alternative Winter Break and join me at jnf.org/break. So for the October 15th program, that's jnf.org/surviving and thriving. And for Alternative Winter Break in Israel, that's going to be jnf.org/break. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you guys then. Have a great evening.